I still remember the moment I froze in front of the Northlight restroom door. My daughter, Marina, kneeling on the cold tile, wearing yellow gloves, scrubbing every filthy groove like someone paying for a crime no one had named, while Veronica, her mother-in-law, sat on a tall chair, chewing a scone and speaking loud enough for the whole cafe to hear. If you can't even stand up straight, then you're only fit to work on the floor. That was the moment I understood that humiliation has shape, has smell, has sound, and can cut deeper than any blade. If you've ever witnessed someone being degraded right in the place where they deserved respect, leave a and tell me where you're watching from. Your presence helps stories of justice like this keep being told, not for revenge, but so those who think they stand above others know the light will reach them too. I went to Northlight Café that morning without telling anyone. Burlington was slipping into winter, and the surface of Pine Street still held mist, like a fogged glass pane that hadn't been wiped yet. Morning light filtered through the rustling maple canopies, falling in pale patches over the cafe windows, the place my daughter had spent nearly 2 years building. I stood outside for a few seconds, my hand on the cold metal door handle, feeling something strange inside, like intuition whispering something my reason refused to believe. I pushed the door gently and the wind chime rang. The smell of freshly roasted coffee mixed with warm pastries drifted out, but the air inside was taut, like a lake stretched tight before a storm. A staff member at the counter startled when they saw me, then quickly turned away, as if avoiding something difficult to explain. I hadn't even asked where Marina was when a faint sound, the harsh brushing of stiff bristles against tile, came from the hallway leading to the restroom. I walked toward it, slowly, like someone stepping into a place they were never meant to witness. And then I saw Marina, my daughter, kneeling on the restroom floor, her knees soaked, her hand gripping an old toothbrush. She scrubbed each tile groove so hard her hand was flushed red, her nails chipped from hitting the edges. Her hair was tied in a rush, strands stuck to her forehead with sweat. The apron she wore had a torn corner, the straps frayed like a market rag. Never in 32 years of being a father had I felt my heart sink so quickly. At the end of the hallway, a college kid was pressed against the wall, phone raised. He was recording this, just a few seconds, enough to turn Marina's shame into content. I was about to speak when a cold female voice sounded behind me. "Stand up straight. You look like someone picked off the street." Veronica Crowell, Marina's mother-in-law. She sat on a tall chair by the counter, indifferent, legs crossed on the wooden bar, holding the clipboard like an endless inspection that would never be done. In! Her hand was half a scone she hadn't finished. I looked at that scene, and my first reaction wasn't anger. It was the feeling of someone pressing hard on my chest. Marina had barely stood when Veronica tossed a coat onto the floor, right in front of a group of customers. She pointed at it, her tone lofty. "Pick it up. Customers are watching." I saw Marina's hand tremble. She bent down to pick it up, trying to hide the strain in her eyes from embarrassment. A few customers turned to look. Some frowned, others glanced at their phones as if thinking, "This would get views online." I walked forward slowly, each step measured like I was counting every millimeter of the anger tightening inside my bones. Veronica looked at me, her smile thin like overpowdered makeup. "Oh, you're here, Harold. Marina is learning a bit of discipline. She needs it." I looked straight into her eyes, then turned to Marina. My daughter forced a smile, flimsy as wet paper. I had taught her to stay polite even when insulted, and now she was using that very lesson to shield herself. "Are you okay?" I asked softly. Marina didn't look at me, only murmured, "Yes, I'm okay, Dad." But her eyes said the opposite. Veronica cut in, irritation coloring her voice. "If you didn't call ahead, then please don't interrupt. We're busy." The cafe opens in 3 minutes. I wanted to say something, wanted to slam my hand on the counter, wanted to pull Marina out of there immediately. But decades of life taught me that exploding now would only give Marina more humiliation. I swallowed my anger, heavy as a stone lodged in my chest. I left the cafe quietly. When I pushed the door open to Pine Street, the cold wind slapped my face, but it wasn't as cold as watching my daughter be treated like a hired hand, not worth the dirt under her nails. I stood outside, looking through the fog glass, seeing Marina struggling to tie her apron again while Veronica sat on her tall chair, as the entire cafe belonged to her alone. And right then, I knew something had rotted in my child's family. Not rotted from time, but from someone deliberately hollowing it out from the inside. I clenched my hand inside my coat pocket and walked away. The Vermont sun was rising, but inside me there was only one thing: the terrifying stillness right before a storm begins. I remember that night, around 9 o'clock, the knock on the door was so soft I thought the wind had nudged the latch. But when I opened it, Marina was standing on the porch, soaked through, hair clinging in strands, raincoat dripping onto the mat. Her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't even pull down the zipper. I pulled her inside immediately, closed the door to shut out the cold seeping through every gap. "What happened, sweetheart?" I asked, my voice dropping because the feeling in my chest wasn't good. Marina stood in the living room, her shadow stretched long across the wooden floor. Her eyes were swollen red, not from the rain hitting them, but from something far heavier. "Dad, I have something to tell you. I can't take it anymore." She placed a plastic-wrapped file onto the table. I recognized it instantly. The Crowell and Finch law firm logo in the upper corner. Like someone who had carried a boulder for miles, Marina sat down, her hands gripping the edge of her raincoat. "This is the family partnership contract Ethan's mother gave me. When the cafe was getting ready to reopen after the renovation, she said signing it would reduce taxes and avoid some fees. Ethan told me, 'Mom knows business. You don't.' And I believed them. I opened the file, each page packed with dry, rigid clauses. After skimming the first lines, I saw something wrong immediately. The word managing partner in Section 3 is listed. Veronica Crowell. The ownership division was spelled out clearly. Veronica 51%, Marina 49%. That number alone told me my daughter had been trapped in a sugar-coated snare. "They hid this from you?" I asked. Marina nodded, tears falling, and she didn't bother to wipe them. "Dad, you know I'm not good with legal language. I thought I should just sign and get it over with." Ethan was standing right there, pushing me to sign. His mother tapped her nails on the table, telling me that if I just did as told, everything would be easier. I looked into her eyes and felt like I didn't have any choice at all. I studied every page carefully. The clauses were crafted cleverly enough that anyone without legal knowledge would think they were standard documents. Control over staffing, capital withdrawal, menu changes, payroll approval, all belonged to Veronica. Marina was allowed only consultation, a polite word hiding the truth that my daughter had no voice in the very cafe she had poured her soul into. Then Marina continued, her voice cracking. "Dad, do you know what she said the day I mentioned changing the cold brew method? She stood in the middle of the cafe in front of customers and said straight to my face, 'I let you marry my son. Remember that before you talk back.' Dad, I've never felt so small in my life." My hand clenched on its own. That wasn't just an insult. It was a stomp on my daughter's dignity. Marina wasn't telling me this to complain. She was telling me because she had reached the end of what she could endure. I looked at her face. Those eyes that once shone like Burlington's early sun now dulled with the exhaustion of someone who'd been cornered for far too long. I pulled the file closer, my voice slow but tight as a blade set on a chopping block. "You signed under pressure. These terms aren't reasonable. I've spent half my life in compliance and safety oversight. One look, and I know. You were forced into a situation where you couldn't refuse. This isn't a family partnership. It's an abuse of power." Marina lifted a hand to cover her mouth, as if afraid that breathing too hard would make her collapse. "Dad, I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I dragged a chair close and placed my hand on her shoulder. Her shoulder was cold, the kind of cold rain carries straight into the bones. Hey, the only thing you need to be sorry for is carrying this alone for so long. As for the rest, let me handle it now. You're not going to kneel ever again, I promise. And I've never broken a promise to you, have I? Marina broke down, not with loud sobs, but with those strangled little cries that happen when someone finally has the permission to fall apart after months of holding themselves together. I let her rest her head on my shoulder, the feeling pulling me back to the days when she was 4, 5 years old, when every hurt she suffered could be soothed with just my arms around her. But this time was different. This wasn't a little girl being bullied in a schoolyard. This was a grown woman whose voice had been snapped in half by her husband's family, whose dignity had been ground down, whose creation, Northlight Café, had been taken from her in everything but name. I looked toward the window where the Vermont night wind drove slanted rain across the glass. Inside me, a familiar feeling stirred, the feeling of a man who had stood in countless inspections, witnessed countless injustices, and knew exactly when a battle needed to begin. And that night, in that small living room, with only the clock ticking steadily on the wall, I knew I had stepped through a threshold. Not the threshold of anger, but the threshold of decision. A decision so firm not even the winter wind could shake it. I would pull my daughter out of the darkness Veronica Crowell had built around her, at any cost. I understood that from the night Marina brought the contract to my house, I couldn't afford to act on impulse. At my age, I know every battle worth winning begins with gathering data. Just like in the years when I worked as a food safety inspector, my notebook always stuffed so full of tiny scribbles that my wife used to call it the Diary of Truth. The next morning, I sat inside Maple and Hearth, the small bakery across the crosswalk from Northlight Café. From my window seat, I had a clear view of my daughter's storefront, the hall leading to the kitchen, the little patio by the door. The coffee in my hand went cold faster than I expected, but that wasn't what concerned me. I came back for 4 days straight. Every morning I arrived at exactly 8:40, sat at the old table by the glass, opened my black notebook, and wrote. I didn't know when the inspector would come. That was impossible because the department guarded its inspection schedule like an internal secret. But I knew the high volatility window, from 9 o'clock to 11. That's when cafes start getting busy, when staff slip, and when careless behavior exposes itself naturally without any push from outside. I didn't interfere, didn't alert anyone to my presence. I simply observed, and that was enough to see what untrained eyes miss. On the first day, I saw a staff member set a tray of knives onto a cutting board without sorting them. A blade that had just cut raw chicken was placed beside one meant for pastries. To a customer, it was just sloppy workflow. To someone with my background, it was cross-contamination, one of the most basic and dangerous errors. On the second day, I saw Veronica order milk to be poured from the carton into glass bottles for aesthetics. Staff complied without labeling the open date. It happened fast, unnoticed by anyone else. But to me, it was the seed of temperature abuse and foodborne risk if left longer than permitted. On the third day, a bag of flour was placed right next to a floor-cleaning chemical. Even from a distance, I could see the hazard warning yellow on the label. One jostle, one popped cap. The consequences would be severe. Naturally, no one, not even Veronica, seemed to care. On the fourth day, I noticed the thermometer inside the fridge. The needle didn't move the entire morning, despite the door opening and closing again and again. A thermometer that freezes usually means one of two things: broken or never functional in the first place. I wrote everything down, every small detail like a steady stream of ink running across the page. That afternoon, as I left Maple and Hearth and walked down the gentle slope of the street, I decided it was time to plant the first seed. But not through confrontation or noise, through the most lawful, quiet, and effective route, an anonymous report. That evening in my small study, I took out the burner phone I had bought at a second-hand shop on Shelburne Street. I accessed the Vermont Food Safety Anonymous complaint portal. I knew exactly what each field required, which questions the department prioritized. I typed slowly, carefully, using the keywords inspectors always flagged first. Temperature abuse, foodborne risk, cross-contamination, chemical exposure. Those terms alone were enough to push any report to the top of the review queue without raising suspicion. I uploaded a series of photos taken from afar, the flour beside chemicals, tools being misused, and the frozen thermometer. I adjusted every angle to avoid showing my reflection in the glass or Marina's face. I didn't want her pulled into this stage. Submit. A small ping confirmed the file had been received. That was it. No applause, no dramatic moment. But I knew the system would now move like the gears of a mechanical clock, slow but certain, and unstoppable once set in motion. As I was clearing my desk, the phone screen lit up. A text from an unknown number. "You're Marina's dad, right? My name's Dana. I used to work at Northlight. Got fired for not fitting the cafe's aesthetic. If you need testimony, I have it." I called back, a young woman's voice trembling slightly. "I don't know what they did to Marina, but I saw the video of her on TikTok. I know that kind of treatment. I've lived it. If you need someone to tell the truth, I will." I held the phone close, hearing her shaky breath like someone choosing every word with care. I asked, "Why help me? This could get you in trouble." Silence for a few seconds. Then Dana spoke, quiet but firm, like someone cutting the last thread holding them back. "Because I know what it feels like to be stepped on by that woman. The day I got fired, she said, in front of everyone, that I didn't match the brand's aesthetic. I stood there, hands still dusted with flour, and she treated me like a defective product. I kept quiet because I needed the job. But when I saw Marina kneeling and scrubbing the floor, I saw myself last year. I didn't dare speak then, but now I want to do what's right." She hesitated, then added, "And Marina once stood up for me. A rude customer caused a scene, and Veronica blamed me for it. Marina took the blame instead, even though it wasn't her fault. Someone like that doesn't deserve what I saw online. You understand, don't you?" My heart tightened. Marina had never mentioned that. Just like every other time, she endured silently, as if her kindness were the only shield she had. I said, slow and certain, "I understand. Thank you for not turning away. Not many young people have the courage you do." Dana replied softly, "It's not courage, sir. I just don't want anyone else treated like a piece of merchandise that came out of the mold wrong." I stood there for a few seconds, quiet. Marina had once mentioned Dana briefly. Good attitude, but left the cafe early. I had assumed she found a better place. Now I knew the truth was much different. The phone warmed in my hand, not from heat, but from the realization that a crucial piece of this puzzle had finally revealed itself. That night, when I stepped out onto the porch, Burlington lay under a thin veil of mist, streetlights catching droplets on the leaves like scattered beads. I breathed in deep, the cold air hitting my lungs like rising resolve. This was no longer just about Marina. It had crossed into the boundary of justice, the boundary I had stood guard over for 32 years. That morning, Burlington was wrapped in a thin rain like a gray veil draped over all of Pine Street. The mist-like droplets clung to the windows of Northlight Café, dragging long, cold streaks behind them. The air in front of the shop was so still that anyone walking by could hear only the soft tapping of shoes on the wet pavement. At around 9:13, a vehicle from the Vermont Food Safety Department stopped in front of the cafe. Two people stepped out. Inspector Martinez, compact build but eyes sharp as a blade, and Inspector Lee, tall, calm, but unwavering. Both wore deep blue jackets, their silver nameplates catching the rain. No one inside the cafe knew they were coming. And that is the very nature of this profession. Inspectors arrive when they choose, never when anyone expects. Martinez pushed the door open, the wind chime ringing with an icy note. Marina was behind the counter, hands still smeared with a trace of coffee from wiping down the grinder. When she saw them, her face drained in a single breath. She hadn't yet logged the refrigerator temperature that morning, something I had told her to do daily to stop Veronica from shifting blame onto her. But today Marina had arrived early to open the shop in place of a sick employee, and a single missed beat was enough to expose every weakness in the cafe. Martinez said evenly, "Morning, random inspection." No one dared object. Veronica stepped out from behind the bar, her face briefly slipping out of control before she quickly restored her usual polished composure. "We always cooperate fully. Northlight follows every regulation. I am the managing partner." Martinez didn't respond, only glanced at her clipboard before saying, "Step aside, please. We need to check the cold storage first." Marina was caught between two kinds of stares, one from Veronica, sharp as if ready to dump all responsibility onto her, and one from the customers, a few curious eyes beginning to drift their way. When Martinez opened the refrigerator door, the silence in the cafe dropped like a ton of stone. Milk was transferred into glass bottles with no date label, a tray of raw chicken beside a bowl of salad, a batch of flour next to a cleaning chemical. The thermometer was unmoving even though the door had just been opened for several seconds. Each violation stood out clearly as ink on a blank page. "No explanation needed," Martinez wrote quickly, like someone looking at something familiar. Lee checked the temperature, shaking his head slightly. Every movement of theirs pushed Veronica's face from pale to ashen. "Who is directly responsible for this area?" Lee asked. Marina tried to answer, but Veronica cut in, voice higher than usual. "My staff are not fully trained. I will rectify—" Martinez sliced her off. "This system failure is not a staff issue. This is a management issue. Step aside, please." For the first time, Veronica stepped back without another word. Murmurs began to rise. A young customer near the door pulled out their phone, recording Martinez placing a yellow warning tag on the inside of the refrigerator door. The reflective tag caught the overhead lights, standing out like a slash across the heart of the cafe. Then a voice rang out from a table near the window, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Isn't this the cafe that forces the girl to clean toilets?" The whole place froze. Marina stood motionless, clutching the cleaning cloth so tightly her fingers turned white. Veronica looked around, her eyes flickering with a rare panic. That moment, the first public blow, wasn't aimed at any single person, but crashed straight into the perfect image Veronica had built for so long. After about 30 minutes of inspection, Martinez closed her notebook and announced, "Northlight Café is fined $2,900. Improvement required within 30 days. We will return for reassessment. If violations persist, the cafe will be temporarily suspended." The air in the cafe grew heavy. A staff member behind the counter exhaled shakily, while customers began leaving earlier than planned. But the second blow came faster than anyone expected. About an hour later, the inspection report appeared in the Facebook group Burlington Eats, where nearly 18,000 locals shared food updates and restaurant reviews. Someone had taken photos of the violation list and the open refrigerator. The post gathered hundreds of comments within minutes, and of course, it didn't take long before people mentioned the circulating clip of Marina cleaning toilets. By late afternoon, Ethan showed up. He read the report, his face darkening, then turned to Marina, voice tight but loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "You ruined everything. Mom warned you this place needed discipline." Marina stood still, no protest, no explanation, just lowered her head, her shoulders trembling like someone whose strength had been drained out of them. I wasn't there, but a staff member called me and recounted nearly every word. I listened and felt only a deep quiet, an ominous stillness before a massive storm. That day, Northlight's reputation collapsed with a single strike. But worse was Marina's eyes, the look of someone realizing she was being abandoned in this battle, both by the public and by her own husband's family. And for me, that was the moment everything passed beyond the threshold of endurance. The first blow had fallen. The second would come from me. News of the inspection spread faster than I expected. Within a single afternoon, Northlight Café had become the hot topic in every food group in Burlington. I didn't care about what strangers were saying. What I was waiting for was the reaction from the woman behind every wound my daughter had endured, and Veronica did not make me wait long. 2 days later, close to 5 in the evening, I was watering the mint beds behind the house when a sleek black sedan stopped right in front of the gate. The car door opened and Veronica stepped out, walking beside a man in a gray suit with gelled, perfectly aligned hair, the kind who looked more like someone hired to intimidate others than a true legal representative. I wiped my hands and stepped onto the porch, keeping my face calm. "Mr. Harold Reyes?" the lawyer said, his tone dry as paper. "That's me." He held out a stack of papers, expressionless. "My client, Mrs. Crowell, demands that you cease immediately any interference with the operations of Northlight Café. We have reason to believe the recent anonymous reviews and damaging reports are connected to you." I looked at Veronica. She stood with her arms crossed, her lips curled in a smile that barely hid her satisfaction. "I didn't write any reviews," I said, steady. "That's the interesting part, Mr. Benson," Veronica cut in, her voice sweet enough to pour honey over a blade. "I hired a tech specialist to check the device that posted the Yelp review. Not the IP, don't worry. We didn't dig into your account, but the signal showed the review was sent from a device using this home's Wi-Fi." I froze. Just for a beat. That was enough for her to know. Yes, I had used my home network to send the review. Not to smear them, but to warn about the careless management threatening customers' health. But in Veronica's eyes, anything outside her control was a crime. The lawyer continued. "If you persist, we will consider legal action for harassment and business interference. You understand, a lawsuit like that can be extremely costly." Veronica looked around my home, her gaze sliding over the old wooden walls, the dining table I had built myself, then stopping at the shoe rack, worn down by years. She let out a small, mocking laugh. "A modest little house. No wonder Marina had to marry up." That sentence wasn't a knife, it was a poisoned thorn. It didn't cut deep, but it stung until it bled. I stood still, every word striking the reputation I had guarded my entire life. But I didn't respond. I knew any reply now would only push my daughter deeper into the pit. The lawyer buttoned his suit, handed me a business card, and turned away. Veronica followed, her heels clicking sharply on the concrete, each step like she was trying to carve her authority into the ground. I watched the black car disappear behind the maples, but the weight in my chest didn't lift. That night, as I made myself a cup of ginger tea to steady my hands, an email arrived. The sender's address was unfamiliar. The subject line held only one word: warning. I opened it. Just 2 sentences colder than the Vermont wind scraping against the windows. "Pay $22,000 USD or your 2004 dismissal goes public. You know what you did." I set the tea down, the rising steam blurring the glass for a moment, as if old memories were surfacing through the fog I had buried them under for 2 decades. 2004. A wound I thought had closed, but had only been resting under thin skin. Back then, I had worked as a food safety supervisor for the state for 10 years. The pay wasn't high, but I was proud of my job. The work demanded honesty because a single wrong signature could destroy innocent livelihoods. But that same honesty dragged me into a fight I couldn't win. A small Mexican restaurant on Battery Street, La Esquina del Sol, had been accused of failing to meet safety standards. When I inspected it, I found no major violations. It was just a poor immigrant family, 3 generations relying on that tiny kitchen. They didn't have money to redecorate their dining room to fit the city's new visual uniformity campaign meant to attract tourists. But a city commissioner who wanted to turn that strip into a high-end culinary district wanted them shut down. He called me to his office and demanded I alter the inspection report. Just write in a few major violations. We need to clear this block for the project. I looked at the report, then at the man trying to use his power to crush a family who had nothing but old pots and the sound of children laughing. I pushed the papers back toward him. I'm not changing something that isn't there. They don't deserve to be shut down just because someone doesn't like how they look. He was silent for a moment, then spoke slowly. You'll regret this. 2 weeks later, I really did lose my job. Not loudly. They only needed a dry clinical statement. Violation of evaluation protocol. Failure to follow internal guidelines. No one defended me. No one spoke up. Rumors spread quickly. Harold Reyes got fired for falsifying inspection reports. I was marked as untrustworthy in a field built entirely on trust. Restaurants grew wary. People avoided me. For years, I could only get temporary jobs, low-paying positions, not enough to support my 2 growing kids. I never told Marina or Jonah about it. I didn't want them to see me through the lens of failure. I didn't want them to inherit my bitterness. And now someone was digging that memory out, ripping open a scar that had barely held, and twisting it into a noose around my neck. I read the email again, not in fear, in anger. The anger of someone who had been crushed once, and who understood they would never allow it to happen again. If they wanted a war, I would stand tall, and this time I would not fight alone. After the threatening email, I understood the war had changed levels. Veronica didn't just want to strip the cafe from Marina. She wanted to erase anyone who dared stand up for my daughter. To win, I needed the law on our side. I went to attorney Samantha Chu, known for handling fraud cases in family-run businesses. When she heard my account, she didn't offer empty comfort or promises. She asked just one question. Do you want to protect Marina or take everything back? Both. Samantha nodded, opened her laptop. Vermont is a one-party consent state. As long as Marina agrees, she has the right to record every interaction with Veronica without informing her. If Veronica expresses intent to seize control, we'll have legal footing. I understood. Veronica was only powerful when unrecorded. Once her words turned into data, she weakened instantly. That night, I called Jonah, my oldest son in Boston. After hearing everything, he drove back to Burlington that same night. Jonah didn't raise his voice or blame Marina. He simply opened his backpack and took out a device no bigger than a lighter. Tracker-style mic, 2-day battery. Clean audio within half a meter. Dad, attach it to the inside of Marina's apron. No one will notice. His composure tightened my throat for a moment. My children had grown up in this house, and now they stood shoulder to shoulder in a fight none of us ever asked for. The next morning, Marina came by. I explained the plan, and Jonah taught her how to activate the device. She listened closely, her eyes worried yet firm, like someone forced to be strong after being pushed to the final edge. I don't want to hurt anyone, Dad, Marina whispered, but I also don't want to live my whole life under my mother-in-law's thumb. No one deserves that, I answered, especially you. The first recording day, in the afternoon, Marina walked into the small office behind the counter with her apron. Veronica was reviewing paperwork, acting as if the entire place had always belonged to her. The device caught her first sentence perfectly. Once I get full control, I'm renaming the cafe. Something in Veronica's tone sent a cold line down my spine. That wasn't an impulsive remark. It was a plan, Marina asked quietly, trying to sound natural. What are you planning to rename it to? Veronica didn't answer right away. Instead, she gave a faint laugh, the laugh of someone who believed everything was already in her grasp. Something with my mark on it. Northlight sounds too amateur. Ethan walked in right then. He seemed to catch half the sentence, frowning slightly. Mom, Maybe we shouldn't... Let me talk, Veronica cut in, slamming the door of the conversation shut. In that moment, the recorder captured every syllable clearly. I thought I finally had the evidence strong enough to turn the whole game. But when Samantha opened the audio file, everything shifted. Right at the most critical part, the sound glitched for 10 seconds. A harsh, metallic rasp. Then silence. The moment Veronica spoke about full control and her intention to rename the cafe, half the sentence was perfect, the other half drowned in static. Samantha leaned back, tapping her desk. We have an admission, but not a complete one. To opposing counsel, this is just idle talk. Not enough to prove intent to seize ownership. Marina went pale. Jonah clenched his fist tight, and I felt my heart sink a notch. The distance between almost winning and enough to end it had never been clearer. But Samantha looked at us, unwavering. Don't lose hope. Someone like Veronica will repeat the mistake. She's too confident to imagine anyone is recording her, and that arrogance will draw her into the open. I nodded. Marina took a deep breath. Jonah rechecked the device, adjusting settings to prevent interference next time. As we left the office, I saw Marina's reflection in the glass door. She walked slowly, but each step steadier than the last. She was no longer the girl kneeling on the restroom floor the first day I found her. She was rising, trembling, but rising, and I knew the truth would surface. Veronica simply hadn't realized she had already stepped into a trap built from her own words. The 9-second clip, the piece of footage I thought had stayed buried in the darkness of that first night, suddenly resurfaced on TikTok on a damp Monday morning. No one knew who posted it. No one knew the source, only that the image of Marina kneeling beside a toilet, wearing yellow gloves, scrubbing each streak of water under Veronica's voice commanding from behind. "Clean it up! Customers cannot see this," appeared cold, sharp, and unmistakable. In less than 3 hours, views had passed 130,000. Food accounts, college students, Burlington locals reposted the clip nonstop. The comment stream spilled out like water breaching a dam. Impossible to contain. Oh my God, this cafe made staff clean toilets like that. Poor girl. Who's the owner? Why does she sound terrifying? Where's the boyfriend? Why let his mom treat his girl like that? Marina's name filled the Vermont trending tab, something she likely never imagined in her life. In the middle of the storm, a major account made everything explode further. Food blogger Leah Doyle, with nearly 300,000 followers, posted a long caption beside a photo of the cafe, "The Dark Side of Northlight Café." In it, she described the clip in detail, recounted comments from customers who had once felt tension in the air, and ended with a line that detonated the conversation. "If this is how Northlight treats the person serving your food, I wonder what else they're hiding." The post hit top Explore within 8 hours. Marina was pulled into two opposite waves, one side defending, sympathizing, protecting her as a victim of abuse of power, the other attacking, mocking, claiming she was too weak, unable to stand up for herself, or worse, dramatic, for attention. Everything crashed onto Marina faster than she could react. I saw her eyes shift, hurt, scared, confused, as though the most private part of her life had been thrown onto the stage for hundreds of thousands of strangers to judge. Meanwhile, Veronica switched into damage control. She posted an official statement on Northlight Cafe's Facebook page. "Marina is overwhelmed, not abused. We care for our staff and will review internal procedures." A perfectly crafted deflection, a subtle blame shift, a sentence turning Marina into someone overwhelmed, sensitive, while casting herself as a concerned owner. Reading it sent a chill down my spine. The smoothness of Veronica's wording was like a glossy coat of paint over rotting wood. An hour later, the cafe's Google rating took a nosedive. New comments flooded in. "Not coming back. If this is true, who dare eat here?" "Support for Marina," Ethan commented under his mother's post. "Mom always helps her. Marina just gets overwhelmed." That line stung Marina more than any of the harsh comments. What she needed from her partner wasn't blame. She needed someone to stand beside her. But Ethan chose to defend his mother first, and abandoned Marina in the middle of the storm with a single dismissive sentence. That evening, I brought everything to Samantha. She watched the clip, read Leah Doyle's post, skimmed the comments, then closed her laptop with the calm of someone watching a part of her plan move into place on its own. Good. Public opinion is helping us. Helping how? I asked. To demonstrate a pattern of abuse. One incident can be called frustration. 2 incidents can be brushed off as a misunderstanding. But a long chain of independent accounts, clips, articles, customer feedback, that is an abuse model, and the court values that almost as much as physical evidence. I was silent for a moment. I never thought social media, the thing I always avoided, would become an ally. Samantha continued. The more Veronica denies, the worse she makes herself look. She's blaming the weakest person, and the internet never forgives that. The next day, I found Marina sitting in my kitchen holding a mug of hot cocoa, her eyes red, but no longer hollow, the way they had been. Dad, everything is getting beyond me. I squeezed her shoulder. No, this isn't the end. This is when the truth starts to have a voice. Marina looked at me, and in her eyes I saw a flicker of strength I hadn't seen in a long time. Outside, the public storm still raged, but for the first time I felt it clearly. Veronica was losing her grip, and the truth was stepping out of Northlight's shadows. 3 days after the toilet clip spread across Vermont, I received a call from an unknown number at nearly 8 in the morning. A man's voice, low, courteous, but carrying the tone of someone who had dug through many layers of dust beneath buried stories, said, Mr. Harold, I'm Marcus Hale, investigative reporter with the Burlington Chronicle. Attorney Samantha Chu forwarded me information about the blackmail email you received. She told me that if you're willing, I should hear the story directly from the person involved, before anyone else tries to twist it. I had never told the story of 2004 to either of my children. Jonah and Marina only knew I had changed careers, not that I had lost an entire profession because of a falsified inspection report I refused to sign. The only person who knew the full truth was Samantha, my attorney. I stood by the window, Vermont light thin as a gray cloth draped over the valley, my hand trembling slightly from the long days of strain. I knew I had only 2 paths. 1, keep avoiding it and let someone else write my story. 2, tell the truth before the lies spread. I drew a long breath. It was time to stop letting the past be used against me ever again. Marcus arrived at my house near 10. He carried a small leather notebook, a recorder resting in his palm, and the eyes of someone accustomed to hearing difficult truths. We sat in the living room. The family photo from 1998 on the wall gave the room a faint warmth from a peaceful era, one I hadn't felt in a long time. Marcus opened his notebook. Where would you like to start? I spoke slowly, each word as clear as reopening a door I had locked long ago. Start with 2004. I told him about that day, about the inspection at a small Mexican eatery, where a city official demanded I sign off on a damaging report simply because the place didn't fit the city's image, about how I refused, about the internal meeting that lasted 10 minutes but ended the career I had built for over a decade. Marcus wrote down every detail, occasionally looking up to ask more questions. When I spoke of being isolated in the industry, losing opportunity after opportunity, taking odd jobs just to get by, he paused for a moment before asking, You were pushed out of the industry because you refused to look away? I nodded. I thought that chapter had stayed in the past, but now someone is digging it up to use as a weapon. 3 days later, the Burlington Chronicle ran the story on the front page. The inspector who refused to look away. The inspector who lost his entire career for standing by a small family restaurant and who was now being threatened again. Marcus told the story with a calm, objective weight. No glorifying, no dramatizing. Only one thing, the truth. He recounted the blackmail email, described how I was pulled into the chaos at Northlight Café, and outlined the abuse Marina had endured under Veronica. The article ignited like a spark catching dry wind. Thousands shared it. Burlington community groups debated, defended, expressed outrage. He did the right thing. The whole city owes him. There is something truly wrong at Northlight. Blackmailing an older man because he won't stay silent? Pathetic. For the first time in 20 years, the name Harold Reyes was not followed by fired, but by integrity. That evening, Marina read the article for the third time. She set her phone down, her voice trembling. "Dad, why did you carry that alone?" I gave a sad smile, because I didn't want my past to weigh on you. But sometimes the truth has to be put in the right place to protect the people we love. Meanwhile, Ethan began to crack in his loyalty to his mother. He texted me late at night. "Harold, the article says Mom did a lot of things wrong. I don't know who to believe anymore." It was the first time I had seen Ethan fall out of Veronica's shadow. A small fracture, but a sign that truth was surfacing. I replied, "Look with your own eyes, not through anyone else's lens." That night, Marina found a small envelope placed at the door, no sender listed. Inside was a $1,000 check and a handwritten note. "Fight back. You deserve justice." Marina's eyes welled. "Dad, who would help me like this?" I knew it was Jonah, but I only said, "Someone who believes you're stronger than you think." Marina held the note tightly, and for the first time I saw a spark of hope in her expression. "Dad, do we really have a chance?" I placed my hand on her shoulder, my voice steady as oak. "It's not a chance. It's the truth standing with us. And when the truth speaks, liars have nowhere left to hide." The media storm still raged outside, but in that moment I knew the tide had turned. And for the first time, Veronica was no longer the one holding the reins. That morning, Samantha walked into my house carrying a thick stack of files clipped neatly inside a black binder. Her eyes were both cold and bright, the look of someone who had finally fitted all the missing pieces into a complete picture. Marina sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cup of hot cocoa, while I leaned against the counter, feeling the air in the room shift into a new color, the color of law. "It's time to file the lawsuit, Mr. Harold," Samantha said, her voice steady, each word edged like a cleaver. "Doesn't matter how they react?" I asked. "Reaction or not, the law runs," she replied. She opened the binder and turned it toward us. 3 major sections marked with red tabs. 1. Fraud. 2. Coercion. 3. Theft by deception. "This is the civil lawsuit," Samantha continued, "based on the 51% family partnership contract Veronica used to control Marina. Every structural flaw, every sign of duress, and Ethan's participation have been written into the complaint. If they don't appear," she gave me a half smile, "we win by default. Default judgment. Pure procedure, nothing to debate." But that was only half the picture. Samantha pulled another stack of documents from the file box. This one edged in blue, not red like the civil case. "And here's the more important part, the criminal case." I frowned. "Criminal? I thought this was only a civil dispute." Samantha shook her head. "Not when there is evidence of misappropriation. The amount of $18,500 that Marina logged in the system, but Veronica withdrew off ledger. This is embezzlement under Vermont law. I've already sent all accounting data, audio recordings, and the health inspection report to the prosecutor's office. The DA has opened a separate file. They'll handle the criminal matter, completely independent of our civil action." Marina swallowed. Does that mean Ethan's mother could actually be arrested?" "If the DA finds enough foundation," Samantha said, "a warrant will be issued. Not immediately. Usually after 3 to 4 weeks of investigation. This isn't a movie. Real procedure takes time. 3 days after the lawsuit was filed, the courthouse sent a notice of civil action to Northlight Café and to Veronica's home. Ethan received a copy as well, and just as Samantha predicted, they did not show up. No email response, no attorney appearance, no explanation. Marina stared at the return notice from the court clerk. They also Just ignore it, Dad. I placed a hand on her shoulder. Not showing up doesn't mean innocent. It only means they think the law can't reach them. Samantha shrugged, looking almost satisfied. In a civil case, failure to appear means default judgment. We'll be granted everything, nullifying the 51% contract, damages, restraining orders. But, she tapped the blue-edged folder, this is the part that will keep them awake at night. On the 4th week, Samantha called me near 8 in the evening. Her voice carried the weight of something significant. The DA has just signed a petition requesting an arrest warrant for Veronica Crowell on Class A embezzlement. If the judge approves it tonight or tomorrow morning, the warrant becomes active. I stood still for a few seconds. Finally, one piece of justice had begun to move for real. What about Ethan? I asked. He may be called in for investigation as an accessory, since he benefited from the unauthorized withdrawal. But the first warrant will target Veronica. Criminal procedure has to move step by step, no shortcuts. But honestly, Samantha paused, her tone slower. With the evidence Marina captured and everything we've gathered, it is almost certain the DA will go further. Marina gripped my hand. Dad, is this going too far? I shook my head. No, sweetheart. This isn't revenge. This is restoring balance. The truth belongs where it should be. Outside, Vermont had begun to release a light snowfall, white flecks settling on the roof like chalk dust. I looked out the window and felt the shift clearly. No more feeling cornered. No more Veronica's shadow over Marina's life. The law had entered the fight, and this time it stood with us. That afternoon, as the first snow of the season melted into thin streaks of mud along the Burlington sidewalks, Samantha's phone rang. She listened for a few seconds, her face tilting slightly before she released a sentence that froze the entire room. Detectives just traced Veronica's card transaction. Comfort Inn, Reno Drive, New Hampshire. 3 hours drive. No one said anything. Marina stiffened, her fingers locking. Jonah narrowed his eyes, his breathing deeper than usual, and I felt the unmistakable sensation of someone turning, a key in a door that had been waiting to open for a very long time. Samantha emphasized, "We go with the police. No one confronts her alone. We observe and wait for their signal." The charcoal SUV carrying us and 2 Vermont State Police detectives crossed the state line under a pale white sky. In the parking lot of the Comfort Inn, 2 New Hampshire State Police officers were already waiting. Detective Rowan pointed toward the second-floor rooms. Room 214. Maintain a distance of 5 meters while we approach. Marina stood close to me, her hand cold as winter glass. Jonah gave his sister's hand one firm squeeze before letting go. I whispered, "It's over, sweetheart. Whatever happens today, you're no longer under their feet." The 2 officers moved first. One counted softly, then, boom! The door of room 214 exploded open. The sound echoed through the corridor, prompting a few doors to crack open. Guests leaned out, some stepping onto the balcony, murmuring like wind sliding across the upper floor. Within seconds, Veronica was restrained, forced down onto the edge of the bed. Her hair was wild, mascara streaking down both cheeks in long lines. An officer read her Miranda rights, voice crisp and steady. She tried to pull away, but the officer's hands on her shoulders kept her pinned. Whispers filled the hallway. What's going on? Is she wanted or something? Humiliation unfolded right there. No social media, no curated clips, only strangers witnessing a downfall that could not be undone. When the police signaled, we stepped in. Marina walked first. The room was cramped. the smell of cheap cleaning cloths and an old heater mixing in the air. On the small table lay a half-eaten takeout container and an empty bottle of water. Ethan sat on the floor, back against the wall, elbows on his knees, his face collapsed like he hadn't slept all night. When he looked up, his eyes were red, his voice cracking. "Mom, what did you do?" Veronica shot upright as if jolted by electricity. "It's all because of that girl. She sabotaged me. She made everything up to steal the cafe. And Harold, too. They all want me ruined." The words shattered like a glass dropped on tile. No one answered. No one believed. Marina stepped forward, not shaking, not retreating, not bowing. She looked directly at the woman who had once forced her to scrub each tile groove, like someone without dignity, and she said in a voice low and sharp, "You didn't just take my cafe. You took the way I saw myself." Veronica froze, her mouth open but no sound formed. Ethan clutched his hair, breathing hard. The officers stood silent, as if they too understood her words were enough to close the darkest chapter of Marina's life. Detective Rowan nodded to his partner. The handcuffs snapped shut, cold and unmistakable. I stood beside Marina, feeling her breath slowly steady. Jonah placed a hand on her shoulder, his, expression still edged with steel but relief visible beneath it. Out in the corridor, guests continued watching. A few shook their heads. One whispered, "What did that woman do to end up like this?" That question wasn't for us to answer. It was for Veronica, before the court, before the law, and in the days that would follow. In that old motel room at the Comfort Inn, I understood one thing clearly. Today, Marina reclaimed herself, and Veronica lost the one thing she believed no one could ever touch, her honor. On the morning of the sentencing hearing, Burlington felt as cold as if a layer of glass had settled over everything. A thin gray mist made the Chittenden County Courthouse look like a massive block of stone quietly waiting for the moment of judgment. Marina walked beside me, small but steady, while Jonah followed close behind, holding the folder of documents like a shield. Outside the courthouse, a small crowd had gathered. Locals, small business owners, service industry workers, and Marina's friends. They were not there out of curiosity, but to witness a hearing that drew a clear line between abuse of power and justice. Inside the courtroom, Veronica sat at the defense table, her wrists cuffed with the soft restraint kind, but still marked by pressure. Her face was drained, her once polished hair now limp and disordered. Ethan sat a few seats away, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes hollow, as if he had finally realized how long he had lived in blind obedience to his mother. Judge Hart, known for being strict but fair, entered and struck the gavel. This sentencing hearing is now in session. The prosecutor presented briefly the misappropriated amount of $18,500, the abusive conduct, the threats toward staff, the falsified internal records, and the clear evidence from the cafe's accounting system. When the clip of Veronica humiliating Marina in the restroom was played, the courtroom went so silent we could hear someone's shoe tap against the floor. Marina did not lower her head. She looked straight at the screen, as if facing the past version of herself she had finally escaped. When Veronica's attorney spoke, he tried to argue there was no malicious intent and that everything was a management misunderstanding. But every word fell like cold stones, because everyone had already seen the truth of her behavior. When asked if she wished to speak before sentencing, Veronica stood, voice trembling but still clinging to pride. "I was only trying to protect the family business. That girl, Marina, is not capable of running it. I did what I did for the greater good." Judge Hart looked at her the way one might look at someone no longer connected to reality. "Ms. Crowell, the court does not rule on self-declared motives. It rules on actions, and your actions cause severe financial, emotional, and reputational harm to another person." The entire room held its breath as the judge lifted the sentencing order. "The court sentences Veronica Crowell, 16 months in custody, full restitution of $18,500, prohibition from operating or managing any business for 5 years. The gavel struck 3 times. Veronica collapsed into her chair, her mouth open but soundless. Her downfall was not loud. It was quiet, cold, like a rotted wall giving way at a single push. Ethan was called next. He shook so badly he had to grip the edge of the table to stay upright. "Mr. Ethan Crowell," the judge said, "the court finds you were not the primary actor, but participated in concealing part of the conduct and benefited financially." Ethan broke into tears. I'm sorry. I didn't know it would go this far. I only did what I did, because she's my mother." The judge nodded slightly, his tone firm rather than harsh. "The court orders 200 hours of community service, mandatory therapy addressing boundaries, power, and responsibility within family systems. This violation will remain on your legal record for 3 years. No jail, but a stain that would follow Ethan for a long time. A consequence no one could endure on his behalf. After sentencing came the ruling on ownership of Northlight Café. Based on the default judgment in the civil case, the judge read, the court restores 100% ownership and operational rights of Northlight Café to Ms. Marina Reyes. Marina covered her mouth. Tears fell, but not from pain. I stood beside her, feeling her entire body tremble, not in fear, but because the final moment of a long battle had opened at last. In the hallway, the group Fair Trade Burlington held up a small sign, "Café Thief No More." A sharp line, but an honest reflection of how the community felt. And then something no one expected. A major Northeast food industry podcast released a new episode that same day. Northlight Case, When Ego Runs a Café. Veronica's name appeared in the title, in the discussion, in every analysis. Not in the way she had once wanted, but as the example of a tyrannical owner exposed. From a savvy business mother, Veronica had become a meme about disastrous management, a humiliation no sentence could erase. As we stepped out of the courthouse, the Burlington wind hit hard, but Marina stood tall, her eyes lifted toward the pale afternoon light. She was no longer the girl afraid to bow her head at Veronica's voice. She was the rightful owner of Northlight, a woman who had walked through the villain's shadow without losing herself. I touched her shoulder gently. "You did it, sweetheart." And in that moment, I knew. Today's hearing didn't just end a case. It ended the reign of someone who once believed she could never be touched.